We're going to call the Budget, Finance, and Investment Committee to order for the May 20th, 2020 meeting. And the first order of business, since this meeting will be virtual, I need to ask for a motion to approve to meet remotely pursuant to Governor Lee's Executive Order 16, which has been extended.
So moved.
Commissioner Dodd makes a motion to approve. Do I see a second?
Second.
Commissioner Piercy seconds. Please call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Secondly, we had I think a pretty good idea last time we met where we asked to approve the mayor's recommended budgets on the front end. And then at any time during the meeting, as these budgets are being presented, anyone that wants to change that can offer a motion to that effect. But I also need a motion to actually approve all the agendas that the mayor will be presenting tonight on the front end. And as I say, would proceed just like we did last time. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson makes a motion to approve that. Do I see a second?
Second.
Commissioner Dodd seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries, and thank you, committee. We did a good job last time getting out pretty quickly, so hopefully we'll be able to do the same thing tonight. The next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes for the May 7th and the 12th meeting. And Mark, do you have a comment on that before we do?
Yeah, the only thing I had different was, from what you sent out, was related to the Election Commission. And in my original minutes that I sent out to you, referenced $350,000 would be available for reimbursement from their budget. But Mr. Farley called and clarified that's $350,000 that is available from the state for the state to either directly purchase us items for us to use and or reimbursements for postage and poll workers. So it's not a total $350,000 reimbursement. We'll just use it one or the other, and that's the only change to the original minutes that I sent to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Gooch to give an approval or not of that.
I move for approval if that's necessary.
Thank you, Commissioner Gooch. I see a second. Second, Commissioner Johnson. Okay, call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, first item on our agenda is the Circuit Court, and I believe Melissa Harrell will be presenting that, and that starts on page 15. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation of Circuit Court is $1,479,093.
Yeah, come on around to the...
We're being recorded, so if you'll speak in the microphone.
And I agree with his recommendation.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to point out, or anybody have any questions on the mayor's recommendation that Ms. Harrell says she's good with? I'm sorry? No, you don't have to, unless you want to. So, okay, we're good with the mayor's recommendation. Do I hear any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, do I hear a motion to amend the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, that one will be presented as it is. Thank you, Ms. Harrell.
Thank you.
All right, our next up is the Circuit Court Judge, and I think Mr. Tidwell Okay,
He's online.
Very well.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is $363,324.
And I don't believe anything changed from last year, so I would urge or move that that same amount go through this year.
Okay, so you agree with the mayor's recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions from our committee?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on line item 106. There was a decrease from last year, 201,335 to 198,667. I'm just curious, did we have some turnover in that department and we're not paying salaries as high? Is that the reason for that adjustment?
Barry, do you have a,
And so that's under deputies, is that it?
Yes, sir. On 106.
So one of the changes from the current year to next year, there's 2 extra days in this year, and there's only 1 extra day next year. And so when we budget these salaries, it's whoever is in there as of today.
thank you, Ms. Nolan.
And so
Commissioner Allen, did that, oh, excuse me, go ahead, Sonia.
They also had 2 positions to turn over, to change out. Some other people left. When Judge Taylor retired, somebody new went in as their new law clerk in that office, and so some changes in the positions meant different salaries, so that was the other reason for the deputy line.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Allen, did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, is there any further discussion on this, the circuit court judge? Hearing none, is there a recommendation to change the budget? Hearing none, we're going to leave that as is and move on to the third item, which is General Sessions Judge. And Mr. Flatt, I believe, is going to present that, please. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my recommendation is $2,307,475.
And we agree with the mayor's recommendation on that.
Committee, does anyone have any questions about the proposed budget? Hearing none, is there a recommendation to change the proposed budget? Hearing no change or no request, we're going to let this one also stand as presented. Thank you, Mr. Flatt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is the drug court, page 17. And Trish, if you want to head up, and Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is $1,573,582.
And I concur with that recommendation.
Okay. Is there anything in particular either one of you would like to point out? I know we've recently split these into 2 entities.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, we, after the passing of Mr. Irvin's, Director Irvin's death, premature death, we split the 2 because he was director of both probation and our court system, our volunteer court system. And so Trish was hired, and she's our new director of that court system, and then Alyssa is our director over probation services.
All right. Do I hear any questions from the committee? Commissioner Dodd.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just wanted to curious about item 499. It's such a tremendous drop. Other supplies and materials. Was there an item or some supplies that you needed? Are you sacrificing here, or what?
We had requested an increase for drug cost, drug screen cost. We do instant tests in the office and then mail them out. So I think we can manage and figure it out, but that was the big difference in that requested versus recommended.
You'll be seeing I assume you'll be having those drug tests occur you think you may have to see this as an amendment later on if you
It
do
may
indeed
have to be
incur-
an amendment later on, but with COVID, our numbers have decreased significantly. So we'll have to start picking those back up as things start loosening up in the community and our ability to have new intakes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any of the committee members? Hearing none, is there a motion to amend this request? Hearing no motion or further questions, this one will also stand as presented. And we'll move on to our next one, which is the other administration of justice of probation. Alyssa Phillips is here. She's welcome to make her way up. And Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation for probation is $1,569,509.
And I'd agree with the mayor's recommendation.
Is there any questions for Ms. Phillips? I do have a question myself on under your probation officers. Do you have a assistant or similar setup to what we had? You were, I think, assistant to the director in the past. So is there money in there for an assistant in this budget?
To the best of my knowledge, there is.
There is.
And how much is that? Sonia's looking that up for me. The reason I'm asking this is since you don't have the other duties and they've been split, I question, do we need an assistant? And if you want to expound on that, you please convince me that you need one.
Right. So previous to my current position, a lot of the budgeting or any other things, I've actually taken on those duties.
Speaking to the mic because nobody can hear you.
I felt
otherwise.
disrespectful not looking at
That's
you.
okay.
But, so previous to the position that I'm in now, a lot of the duties of that I've taken on are actually duties that I've already been doing for the last several years. As far as running the probation department, writing procedures, financials, staffing, things like that. There are additional duties that I have to take on, such as, meetings, writing the budget beginning to end, things like that. So in saying that, some of the other duties that I've been juggling as far as there is no other supervisory role that's in the probation department right now, so I have the responsibility of managing 20 employees, and I can only be in one place at one time. So I'll be happy to give a list of different things that I'm responsible for if need be. I'll be happy to do that, or any duties that would be passed on to an assistant if that's approved.
So you have a total of 20 employees that are direct reports to you, is it?
I do, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, might I add, it was kind of a shock with losing Director Steve Irvin. And so I started looking at all of our departments, and I challenged them that you never know when circumstances are going to take somebody away from us. We find that every day, but that's not our calling. It's someone higher than us. But we need to be prepared for somebody to step up and take that challenge. So I challenged all of our directors to find them a good number two. Fortunately, going all the way back to Trey King, when Trey was over trying to run both, and they were kind of new with probation and our drug courts, et cetera, we were fortunate that Alyssa was there and kind of assumed some of those responsibilities. But right now, she stepped up and had been doing a lot of that for Trey King and even Steve. They don't have anybody trained that if you were injured or tragically taken from us in a car accident or anything else, or a heart attack or stroke or whatever, there's nobody that could step in, right? So that was what I was asking them to try to find somebody or create that position for a good number 2 in every one of our departments where we don't miss a beat, because when you miss a beat, especially with fragile clients as those who are on drugs and we're not testing them constantly, staying on top of them, making sure that they don't fall back into the same old habits. We slide back 2 steps. We're trying to take 1 step forward. So that was my recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandra, do you have that total?
Yes, sir. The total, including the 1 extra day, would be $51,974. And
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
$51,974. And that is actually an existing employee who's helped some with some of the overall operations of the office. Her name is Kelly Haley. And so the desire would be to increase her salary to the assistant director's level. And it would be a little more than $3,000 pay increase after her step, her normal step.
Okay. So Lisa, or maybe Mark, one of y'all can answer this. With these 2 departments that have been split, if we had them together with these budget totals, how does that compare to last year's combined budget? I heard Sonia say it was about $3,000 over that one person's pay.
Are you talking about the salaries as a total?
I'm talking about the budget as a total for the 2. I'm wondering how it compares.
Yeah.
In comparison from last year to this year, it's actually going to be less in comparison because we've made different, and I'll follow up with that if now, we've actually decreased the budget in comparison, and you can look at item 351 in particular. That's going to be our rentals, because we do plan on moving into the old judicial building, new old judicial building. So that cost was actually cut there, but in comparison, it really would actually be less.
So the 2 combined from what we had when Steve was there, by splitting the 2, still giving her an assistant, the overall budget of the 2 combined, even though they're split now, as our recommendation, is less than what we had last year. Right, Alyssa?
Right. It's actually a difference of $38,528.
That's what I was looking for. Okay. That's all the questions I've got for you now. That doesn't mean somebody else is welcome to ask. Are there any other questions from the committee on this budget recommendation? Hearing none, does anyone want to make a motion to modify this recommendation? Hearing none, we're going to let this one stand as presented. Thank you, Alyssa. Next is Chancery Court, page 18. John Bratcher, please come up, and Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation for this year for Chancery Court is $1,179,079.
Welcome, Mr. Bratcher. All right.
We actually we're giving him 1 new position, requested 2, but we gave him 1.
And I accept the mayor's recommendation.
What position was that?
By the way, I'm smiling.
John, what was that position we gave you?
It was for a position to handle our conservatorships and accountings that right now are getting behind, and we administer millions of dollars of citizens' funds in conservatorships for adults as well as guardianships for minors, and there are new requirements with regard to that. In fact, we're going to have to start training conservators and guardians. Rather than just giving them our handbook that we have now, we're going to have to sit down and train them.
Okay, you heard the recommendation and Mr. Bratcher's approval. Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing no questions, is there a motion to change the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we'll let this one also stand as presented. Thank you, Mr. Bratcher.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Juvenile Court. Ms. Davenport, if she's here, and that's on page 19, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for Juvenile Court is $840,318.
Good evening.
Hey, there she is.
Here I am.
Welcome.
I accept the mayor's recommendation.
Okay. Is there any questions from committee members or anything you'd like to add, Judge Davenport?
No, we'll accept. We will hope for a position, but we know that's not feasible this year. So we're going to accept the mayor's recommendation.
Do I hear any questions for the judge or for the mayor on this recommendation? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to amend the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, then we will also add this one as presented and move on to our next one, which is the district attorney on page 20. And Mr. Jones, if you're here or online, and Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for the district attorney is $187,560. Basically, it's a very simple budget made up of salaries and dues.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to concur with the mayor's recommendation.
General, good to see you. Does anyone have any questions to the Attorney General on his budget request? I notice that's a bit of a decrease there, so we appreciate the help. Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to modify the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we'll also accept this as presented by the mayor. Thank you.
Mayor, Commission, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is the Office of Public Defender, and I think Mr. Milton's online. That's also on page 20, Mayor.
Yes, sir. My recommendation for the Office of Public Defender is $181,430.
Okay, Mr. Milton.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for letting me be here tonight. I want to thank the mayor, Ms. Nolan, for the work they do annually on this budget. We accept the mayor's recommendation and hope the committee will pass it. We certainly thank the committee and for its support of public defender services for many years now.
Thank you, committee. You've heard the recommendation. Also, Mr. Milton's approval of it. Are there any questions for Mr. Milton or the mayor on this proposed budget? This is also a decrease. Hearing no comments, is there a motion to modify or change the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we're also going to add this as presented. And next up on page 21 is Youth Services. Todd Savage, if you're online, there he is. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is $974,671. Yeah, that's it.
And we are in agreement with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Savage. Are there any questions on this proposed budget? And this is also a slight decrease from last year.
I think that's the one-day difference. Is that correct, Lisa, Sonia?
On the salaries?
Yeah. She concurred that it was a difference on how many days being worked.
One day on the calendar difference.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments or questions on this budget? Hearing none, is there a motion to modify or change this budget? Hearing none, we'll also accept the youth services budget. as presented and move on to domestic violence. That's on page 22, Mayor.
Our recommendation is $271,407 with no new positions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Monique, are you online with us? Yes.
Good evening. Yes, sir. I'm here online. And we are happy to accept the mayor's recommendation.
Okay. You've heard the mayor's recommendation, also Monique's agreement to that. Does anyone have any questions on the domestic violence budget? Hearing no questions, is there a motion to modify or change the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we'll also add this as presented and move on to the Correctional Work Center on page 27. And Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation for the Correctional Work Center, Mr. Cope, is $4,734,546, and I believe that's adding one new position. Is that correct, Mr. Cope?
Yes, sir.
What is that position? Can we share with the committee?
That position will be a correctional officer / litter pickup driver.
So are any of the funds coming out of the litter grant?
No, that will be, we'll be working with that litter grant on the other position.
Oh, gotcha.
So
okay.
that will allow us to have 2 additional positions that we originally asked for. We were able to work out.
Yeah, we were able to work out, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we were able to work out, as we talked about in Public Works the other night, Mr. Cope and Mr. Nolan have sat down a couple of weeks ago, and had a lot of people always ask me, it didn't make any sense why Mr. Nolan would come to the Correctional Work Center and pick up inmates to go out and pick up litter, and if one of them got sick or whatever, had to bring them back, but he had to load up all 12 of them that they had in their van and bring them back to the Correctional Work Center. So it was a lot of time not picking up the trash. So Mr. Nolan gleefully gave that up, and along with the trailer and a couple more trailers, I think he's willing to give you to pick up trash, and it's become a real issue for our county. But as we continue to get more and more crowded, the trash issue has become greater, and so they're out there working hard, and so this is going to be another position for that, right? Okay.
And I gladly accept the mayor's recommendation, and thank you and Lisa for all the extra help that you all put forth in helping us put this together this year. It's hard to make reductions when you're dealing with housing human lives, but you know, we've done our best, and I think we did a good job this year.
Okay. You've heard the mayor's recommendation and also Superintendent Cope's agreement to that. Are there any questions from the committee?
I've got one.
Commissioner Piercy.
Line 401, animal food and supplies. What type of animals are you feeding?
That is our canine.
Asked for 5. Can you feed him on 3?
We asked for 5. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Asked for 5,000 and you've got 3,000. Will that feed him?
I hope so. I hope so. We were asked several questions about that originally.
I think we actually, it was at 10, we cut it to 5.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually cut it down to 5.
To 5, from 10 originally, I believe, and that includes not just food, but also veterinarian bills.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any further questions on this proposed budget?
Mr. Chairman, this is Rhonda Allen. I have 2 questions.
Chairman Allen, go ahead.
On line 399, other contracted services, that went up by almost $58,000 over last year. Can you tell me what that's for?
That may be easier for Lisa and the mayor to answer. We had recommended right around the same number. That line is what our medical costs come out of, and I know that we have had some medical cost associated with a young man that was out at the county nursing home. So I don't know if that has mostly to do with that, but that was added in the recommendation.
But also Mr. Rudd's contract with the Sheriff's Department and with Correctional Work Center, his rates did go up. But I believe his contract runs out this next year, so we'll be putting that back out to bid.
Yeah, medical services is exactly the answer I expected to hear there, so I just wanted to make sure. And then on line 709, you had requested $100,000 for data processing equipment, and we didn't give you any of that. So what is it you were asking for?
That was going to be the mechatronics.
That is, we have decided to not ask for that money this year and possibly bring it back up next year, hopefully. Our mission to rehabilitate is still the same, but we have taken on additional duties as far as the cleanup goes. So right now, our focus is more going to be on work as opposed to doing the mechatronics, and hopefully, the mayor and I have talked about it. There's possibly a grant out there that we hope to apply for this year, and maybe we'll get that in a different way. But that was part of our cost cutting and bare bones budget, is to take that completely out.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions, Commissioner Gooch?
I was just going to ask, how many canines do you have?
We have one.
Is this the first year that you have one?
No, this is the second year. The first year, the Pauls took all the cost on with that animal, because that's actually where we got her at. And in our agreement was that we would pick up the cost the following year.
I'm sure that y'all got plenty of scraps y'all could give it if you run out of food.
She doesn't eat scraps, but but we do have plenty of extra bologna laying around if she were to eat. Yeah.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the committee members or any other people with us? Hearing none, is there a motion to change the mayor's recommendation that Mr. Cope also has agreed to? Hearing no comments and no recommendations to change, we'll accept this one as presented by the mayor. Thank you, Superintendent Cope.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up, Lynn, if you want to be making your way up on page 28, Mayor, juvenile detention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for juvenile detention is $2,877,899.
Welcome, Lynn.
Good evening. And we also accept the mayor's recommendation tonight.
Originally, Chairman of the committee, she had requested, I believe, 40 hours of overtime, and she's being very conservative in that request of the 40, but always, and looking historically, has to come back and ask the committee, for additional funding. So we went and bumped that to 60. And for overtime, just to keep her from coming back and feel more comfortable with that 60, because that's kind of what it's been averaging, hasn't it?
How many part-time people do you have now? I know we had worked on...
We currently have a total of 4 part-time positions, and right now I have some openings, and those positions aren't all currently filled.
Okay. Do I hear any other questions from the committee, or Ms. Duke or the mayor? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to modify the mayor's recommendation on this budget? Hearing none, we'll accept it as presented. Thank you, Ms. Duke.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the County Fire and Rescue. Chief Farley, if you want to make your way up, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for County Fire and Rescue, including volunteer fire departments, is $4,164,112. And that, I believe, it was much larger than that. And Mr. Farley stepped up when I sent out the letter to all the departments telling them that I was going to have to eliminate, for my recommendation, I asked them to bring back in January a needs and then a wants budget. And after COVID started creeping into our life, I sent out another letter and told them to scratch both of those and bring back a bare bones budget. Mr. Farley, Chief Farley stepped up and took out one of the trucks, felt like that we could get by for another year. To see where we stood, so that was a large.
2 trucks, but it's 1.7 million less this year than last year.
So his budget's 1.7 million less than what it was last year. You'll see. And remember, members, so much of this budget comes from our side as hotel motel tax. And I received a letter today from Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce. Embassy Suites is laying off 171 people. I talked to Pam Little at Doubletree. They've laid off 78. So hotel motel tax, where we arrive at situs income to pay, Doubletree's laid off 73 people. So this next year will be tight. So my hat's off to Chief Farley for stepping up and tightening the belt there and doing without this truck.
And I fully agree with the mayor's recommendation.
I have a question. Which line item are the volunteer departments paid out of?
It's 399.
399. All right. That's under other contracted services, all right. And then another question, item 169, part-time personnel. What part-time personnel do you have?
We have probably about 10, 11 different part-time people. Basically what they do is if we have somebody on vacation or out causing us sick, we offer the part-time people a position to come in and work. And most of those are firefighters full-time with Laverne and Murfreesboro and other departments, and they'll cover like a one shift for us.
So they're trained.
Yeah, they're all certified and trained, and they have to have that certification stuff before we'll hire them as part-time. And basically, it's kind of the same way the ambulance service does it. Just PRNs, no benefits and nothing. They just work part-time when we need them.
They paid at what, an hourly rate? $13 an hour. Is that open to all the volunteers in the county?
At one time we offered it to all the volunteers, and we got to where we couldn't get nobody. They did it for a while, and we couldn't get nobody to do it. And we offered that to every volunteer department.
Is it still open to every volunteer?
We haven't been doing it because it failed.
But would you be open? I guess this question is, you'd be open to.
If somebody's got the certification, I mean, that's what we passed in the past. They had to have firefighter 1 and EMR, and if they do that, they're welcome to apply.
EMR, what's that?
It's a first responder certification license. They have a little medical. You got first responder, which is a EMR, emergency medical responder. You have EMT, AMT, and paramedic, and so that's the base level of medical.
Is that a course offered by Red Cross?
We actually offer that course every year through our training coordinator, Paula Todd. Matter of fact, she's starting a class in It was supposed to have started in April, but because of the COVID, we pushed it back to July. So there is a class coming up.
Well, personally, I would strike this line item unless we send notification to our volunteers and offer this to qualified people to at least get on the list to be called.
If they,
And to me, this is
if they went through the training.
if they're trained. They
If they're
have to
trained.
have the training.
Okay.
Yeah, basically all we ask is that they have firefighter 1 and EMR, and they apply through HR, and then HR does all the paperwork, and then they send us to us. But I mean, we pretty much open that to anybody who's willing to work.
Sure. So when somebody goes down, they're out on vacation, or they're sick, then that's who you go to on that list. Is that correct?
I don't have a problem with it as long as it's conducted in that way.
Well, like I say, we usually post it. HR posts it, and for anybody, and the qualifications in the past have been firefighter 1 and MR, so anybody's welcome to apply.
Well, I'm asking you to send a letter to the volunteer departments and let them know that they can apply.
Okay. I sure will.
Any of the other committee members have a question for Chief Farley or the mayor on this recommendation? Trey?
On the site development, do you know has it been determined where we're building as far as a new station or anything?
What that is, Commissioner, is when they built the Barfield station, they required us to pour pervious concrete, and it was a trial thing at that time. Since this time, we have learned that it's not been meant to drive over with 50,000-pound trucks. It started to deteriorate, and it's left big ruts out there of concrete. It cost us $4,000 to put a brand new set of tires on the trucks, and every time they pull in there and turn, it just shreds them, just knocks a big chunk out of them. I've showed the mayor the pictures of those, and so I've got worked out a deal with Superintendent Greg Brooks. He's going to dig it all up and haul it off for me, and that money just is enough money to bring the concrete in and re-pour it in just regular concrete. We're going to be able to bank it up on the south side and drain it toward the right side of the property, and then we'll run back in the river.
Okay, committee, does anyone else have a question? If not, I've got something I want to bring up. But Paul, to you.
Would it be in order to go ahead and address Chief Farley's budget amendment request while we're at it, since he's already up here?
We'll do that. Let's finish this first, and we'll make sure we do his budget amendment before we let him go. Yeah, we're not through talking to him by ways yet. Any other questions from the committee members? If not, like I said, I have another comment I'd like to put out. Okay. Several years ago, those of you that have been on budget for a while or public safety know that our volunteer departments were running extrication. There were 3 trucks, Amityville, Kitchell, and I believe Walter Hill. Those 3 units had a truck. The county's since taken those back. However, there's still a need for extrication out in the county. We had a call last week and had to wait about 25 minutes for one of Mr. Farley's trucks to make it out to Kitchell to get a trapped person out. So here's what my recommendation was, and of course one of you would have to come up with that, is I'd like to add $80,000 to the volunteers line for extrication equipment, and that would be $20,000 per department for departments that desire to run extrication. Now, they don't have to do this. They don't get the money if they don't. They also would have to be TARS certified to do extrication. And I've seen some bids. This $20,000, basically a jaws of life type instrument, a cutter, spreader, is around $16,000. Airbags, basically to jack the cars up to get them off somebody pinned or trapped, is around $4,000. But anyway, it would take about $22,000 to get that and cribbing.
It would actually be, if you want to do the full equipment, it's probably about $35,000 per department.
Well, evidently, I've got some bids that are lower than that. Okay. And like I said, and you're probably right too. I'd have to compare what they came up with. The departments would have to pay some, if we're just giving them 20,000. But first of all, there's stipulations to this. First, they would have to want to do it. We're not requiring them to do it. Second of all, their members would have to be certified to do extrication, and they're certified through TARS, which is the state rescue squad group that does that certification. And of course, they would have to apply for the money to our finance department to get that.
We can teach that class also to them. We have instructors in that. I won't go into it tonight, but I'd like to sit down with you sometime and kind of get more of an idea of how you want to operate that. If we would be full-time or part-time, or how you want to.
Well, basically, they'll be putting them on their frontline truck that goes out. I'm not talking about another vehicle. They'd be using vehicles that they respond now. If there's a wreck over in Kitchell's district, for instance, they have a frontline truck that goes out. Well, that truck would have extrication equipment available on the truck for them to use instead of having to wait for another unit to come from a distant station to get there. But anyway, I'm open to a recommendation or a motion from the committee to change or to add to Mr. Farley's budget if y'all so wish. Commissioner Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Nolan, what line item would that go into?
I would, $399 is the other contracted services that we pay them. And so I'm assuming, since it is for the other volunteers, that it would just flow through that line.
So I'll make the motion to add $80,000 into line item 399 for the purposes of what we discussed.
Thank you, Commissioner Gooch. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Johnson seconds. One thing I want to add, there are actually 5 departments that are doing volunteer work for us. The 5th one, and the reason I didn't add them, is Eagleville. And that being a municipality, I figured, they would pick that up if needed. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on Chief Farley's budget?
So this is not an automatic payment, right? They have to apply.
It is not. They have to first ask you, and then they have to have certified people. I happen to know that Kitchell's got 14 certified extrication out of their 21 certified firefighters. They've got other firefighters that are going through training, but they have 14 that are certified right now. So they're capable of going ahead and picking this up as soon as they can get the equipment. Commissioner Piercy.
So how many volunteer fire departments do we have excluding Eagleville? 4 or 5? 4.
That'd be 20,000 apiece for.
These units, y'all were kind of different in price. What was the variation there on that?
I haven't seen his numbers. He hadn't seen mine. I'm going by the bids that the chief out at Kitchell gave me. He actually, the cutter spreaders that he's got are normally 16,000 apiece. The airbags are around 4. I'm doing this from memory. The airbags are around 4,000, 3,000 something. Also, blocking that you use, the kits to hold stuff in place while you go up in there to stabilize it, was another couple of thousand, right, 1,900. Everything together was 2,200 on the bid that I've seen. Okay.
2,200.
If you buy the cutters, spreaders, and rams, and the rescue jacks, and all the cribbing and stuff, it's been costing us around $35,000. So I'd like to get to who he's talking to, but I mean, that's basically what caused us to have airbags and everything that we've been using.
The reason I'm questioning this, 80,000 is just a ballpark number, but if all 4 decide they want to do it and can do it, and it's going to take another 80,000 to make all 4 happen, where will that next 80,000 come from? That's my question. Will it have to be drawn out of general funds in the coming budget, or what?
That would be my guess, Commissioner, but like I said, you know, I know what the Kitchell's department has got some hard bids, and I know what it's going to cost them. So they'll be able to, if there's any difference in there, they'll be able to make that up themselves. Now, the other departments, if they decide to do that, and I assume they could get the same bids that Kitchell's got.
Will they have to pay for training to learn to use this new equipment?
Commissioner,
we can train them. We have instructors to train them. Mr. Chairman, I would request one thing, that if they purchase this, that they would buy their Hamatro tools. That way they have everything, the same stuff we have, and that way we have a technician who can actually work on them.
well, like I said, I don't know the name brand. I'll share that information with you. I'll email it to you as far as what tools, and the company they're working with, I think, is out of Memphis. But I'll share that with you now. As far as there being a change, we've got several more weeks of budget. I think between now and then, I'll get with Chief Farley. We should be able to nail down a price on what it would cost, and probably hear from these other departments to see if they're interested. But I'd ask that, we do have a motion and a second, I'd ask that we go ahead and pass this. If we need to modify it, Commissioner Piercy, I'd be happy to entertain that. And like I said, we've got several more weeks to look at these.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Robert Stevens.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. I'm not necessarily opposed to this. It sounds like a good idea, but I think there's a lot of details that need to be worked out before we start pledging money. Because like Commissioner Piercy said, if we pledge $80,000 toward this and it's really $150,000, I've got concerns about where that's going to come from and how it's going to be administered. I would like to do this, but I just think it might be better to do that in a few weeks after we've had time to come up with a plan and figure out what equipment we need, who's responsible for this, and who's responsible for that, before we just start giving away money. So I'm going to vote no on this proposal. I would vote yes for it later after we had more details and knew more about where the funding was coming from, et cetera.
I understand. Are there any other comments from any of the other committee members? Commissioner Gooch.
You said that Kitchell is kind of like ready to go as far as having the manpower and the training, but you're not sure of the other three.
I haven't asked them.
Would you be able to get that information during the budget process before the budget's adopted to kind of ascertain?
I feel sure I can. It's just a matter of giving them a call, and I know most of these guys anyway. So, Commissioner Johnson.
We can tentatively approve this for further information, correct?
We can, and as I stated when I first started talking about this, you know, Amiable, Walter Hill, and Kitchell, all three were doing this job. It's not a matter of can they do it. They have done it, and we have trained personnel at Kitchell that want to do it. You know, they just need this equipment. And like I said last week, we had a vehicle that took almost 25 minutes for a response from the county to get to our location. Had we had this on there, we could have got that out. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if that was my family in that vehicle trapped, I'd like for the equipment to be on there and available for these people. So that's what I'm requesting. Commissioner Dodd.
Does the chief, I'll just ask you, do you oversee the volunteer fire departments?
Yes, in my job description, yes, sir.
And if the volunteer fire departments had requested extrication equipment, or had you suggested they get it, then your specifications would have been perhaps more holistically considered, because they may have bid a brand name that your other extrication equipment is. If it's different, it's going to be complicated.
Well, my thing is, if you're going to purchase it, purchase everything that's compatible.
I would agree. So you can interchange it, you can provide maintenance and so forth. So I am I'm concurring with Commissioner Stevens. I'd like to see this have a little bit of collaboration before we budget, which it sounds like the budget may be low. So that'll be part of my process in this next vote.
Any other discussion from any of the committee members?
Mr. Chairman, this is Rhonda Allen.
Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Commissioner Dodd and what Commissioner Stevens said. Typically we have ideas like this much more fleshed out by the time that we vote on them. And I feel like there's a lot of open issues here that we don't really know exactly how this is going to work. And so the other thing is, I don't know that this has come through public safety. And if they've discussed it, I'd like to know what their thoughts and recommendations were. But it just feels like it's a little premature to vote on this with as little information as we currently have.
Okay, I didn't provide the hard bids and the equipment that was actually being purchased. Like I said, I have seen them. I've been working with their chief for a couple of weeks to get this information together. I don't have a problem with us looking to see exactly what it would cost to get the same equipment that Chief Farley has got. And I agree that it's good if you can use the same equipment from truck to truck. You know what you're doing when you move from one to the other, and you've got people trying to use it. However, I think that this is a good idea. We may have to modify the cost on it, but will of this committee will speak. And let's see, are there any other comments?
I'll just make a comment, and I appreciate the concerns there. The reason I made the motion was to kind of put some money on the table, and it may be too low, and that's why if we can kind of ascertain who all is interested in this program, and in the meantime, look at the compatibility of the equipment and so forth to see if we need to raise it. I think the concept is great, to having those jaws of life out there in the rural area. This just kind of gets the ball rolling as far as putting some money on the table, making that commitment, and then in the meantime, before the final budget is adopted, can come up with a plan of how we can move forward with the equipment and so forth.
So having said that, are you saying you want to withdraw your motion, or you want to keep it as standing?
We'll go ahead and keep the motion, again, the way it is, just so that we're making a commitment to this concept and have some money on the table. If we need to come back prior to the final budget adoption to increase it because we found out some more information, then I'll be for that. But as right now, I would like the motion to stand.
Okay. Any other discussion on this motion to modify the mayor's recommendation and add $80,000 to the budget of the volunteers? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Piercy?
No.
Mr. Stevens? Commissioner Stevens?
No.
Commissioner Allen?
No.
Commissioner Allen?
No.
Commissioner Dodd?
No.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
No.
Mr. P?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Before
Okay.
we leave this issue, I don't know if you can make it into a motion or not, but I would like to revisit this, maybe not tomorrow night, but at our next meeting that we have these budgets to look at, and let y'all have the time to get your numbers together and maybe contact the volunteer fire departments and see if they're interested or not, and then bring this back to a vote and see if it will pass that way.
Well, you're looking at 35, 70, 140,000 versus 80,000, just roughly, if going by Chief Farley's bids. So that's basically the difference that you're looking at. So
I'm not sure what you have in mind, but I'm talking about full set of education.
Well, you said 35,000. That's what I'm counting numbers, beans. So I wouldn't count equipment or specifying equipment. But the difference in cost from the bids I've seen versus what he's quoting there, 35 versus 20,000. So that would be 80,000 versus, what did I say, 140?
If everybody don't want to do it, then that probably be enough money. But we have to anticipate everybody would want to do it.
My guess is the other departments would be happy to take those equipment and get the training. Most of them probably already are trained. And if I was a betting man, I'd say for sure Hamilville would be. And Commissioner Piercy.
It's not that I'm against the idea. I just don't think we had enough information to actually vote it in. I didn't see any need of voting 80 in and need 80 more. But, if y'all be more than willing to get the information together, I'd be more than willing to vote on it again when we knew what we were actually doing.
I understand. Okay.
And I just want to agree, it's a critical, you've pointed out how critical it is, and I think we can bypass public safety, we can, and bring it straight to this budget committee. If it's not the 21st, then the next meeting. I would anticipate and hope this would come back to us with more collaboration, and I think we'll entertain it strongly and understand it's critical because you had the emergency.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodd.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Allen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one more thing I wanted to add. As you all are collaborating and sort of nailing down the details on this before it comes back to us, one of the questions I would like answered is, are you going to allow each volunteer department to choose their own equipment? Because you talked about two different bids, two different, multiple prices, and I'm just curious if you're gonna let one buy not compatible equipment because it's a better price, and then if you're going to let another buy more expensive. So those are some of the details I'd just like to see fleshed out before we talk about it again.
I concur. I think it should be too. The equipment has to be quality equipment, and I feel sure the bids that Kitchell got is. Now, whether it's the same equipment that Chief Farley is recommending, I don't know. Could be exact same. We may be just getting a better bid than what he's getting, or we may be asking for less equipment. Basically we're asking for a cribbing kit, airbags, this cutter, and spreader. So at any rate, I'll make sure that Chief Farley gets the information that I have. We'll forward that, and we can collaborate, and also ask the other 4 departments if they're interested, find out which ones have the certified people or not. But we definitely have plenty of time to look at this. Now, having said that, we haven't modified his budget as of yet. Are there any other comments from the committee on Chief Farley's budget? Hearing none, is there any other motion to modify the mayor's recommended budget? Hearing none, it also stands as presented. Thank you, Chief Farley. Next is building code. Oh, I'm sorry.
Budget amendment.
Exactly. Thank you. Paul almost did what you reminded me of and almost forgot that. Thank you for reminding me again, folks.
My budget amendment is to move $2,900 from 355 travel to 452 utilities. $2,008 from 336 equipment maintenance to 499 other supplies and materials. $5,000 from 708 communication equipment to 338 vehicle maintenance, and $10,000 from 708 communication equipment to 499 other supplies and materials.
This is all within your budget, and you think that should see you through the rest of the year?
Yes, sir.
Maybe you've seen the request. Are there any comments or questions, or do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I hear a motion from Commissioner Johnson, second from Commissioner Piercy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Chief Farley. All right. Okay, next is building codes on page 33. Tanya, if you want to be making your way up, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for building codes is $1,232,000.31. And let's see, that is actually giving her 1 new position plus 1 part-time. She has, am I correct?
No, you replaced. My original request was we have 2 part-time positions. My original request was to convert 1 to full-time. And that one you removed, so you just removed back to 2 part-time.
2 part-time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I concur with the mayor's recommendation. And I'd like to go over, there's two significant increases in my budget that I'd like to go over. The first one, of course, is the extra inspector in deputies in 106. Pre-COVID, we seen a 30% increase in building permits and inspections for this year versus last year. Mid-COVID or post-COVID, or I just checked those numbers today, and that has since dropped to 27%. So we've seen a little bit of a drop during the last couple of months that brought it to about 27%. So we're going to make some changes to our hours, our inspection hours. We used to stay in the office for the first hour in the morning and not leave until 9 o'clock. So we are going to change that and require that our inspections be called in the day before, and the inspectors are going to hit the road at 8 o'clock. So they will have an extra hour every day to inspect. So one inspector should be, we're going to make that work instead of two. The other addition was in 399 in other contracted services. We have had 3,000 in the past, and we have increased that this year to 30,000. The reason for that is that we have got 6 vacant and dilapidated properties in Rutherford County that we have been working for an average of about 3 to 4 years to try and clean up. And so $30,000 is going to allow me to put a dent in some of those, hopefully, at least work on maybe 1 or 2 of them and get them cleaned up.
I can vouch for the director there. I've actually called and complained about some of these structures not being taken care of because they're a danger to the community. Some people are going into buildings that could collapse, that have been left after fires, that kind of thing. That's the kind of damage you're looking at. The owners are not able to take care of that, or
right. We have rodent infestation, and just they're just a danger to health and safety of the citizens.
So is it true that your pool permits are up?
Yeah, I think everybody sat around at home and thought, you know what? I believe we'll put a pool in this year. Since we're going to have to stay home anyway.
Instead of buying a boat and traveling, they're putting in pools.
Yes, we have seen a significant increase in pools.
Just a point of clarity, please.
Mr. Dodd.
To clarify, is it how many employees are you're adding 1? Just clarify what you're adding.
Yes, pre-COVID I had requested 2, and the reason I had requested 2 is 1, for the significant increase that we've seen in building permits, and 2, because we have 2 of my building inspectors are well past eligible retirement age, and both have indicated that it is imminent within the next year or 2. So I was just trying to get ahead of the curve and try and get somebody on the ground trained and ready to go before they retired. Well, I originally asked for 2. There's one in there.
One.
Right. And we've adjusted our hours, and we're going to increase the number of hours that we're inspecting, so I anticipate that we'll be able to cover that.
1 full-time additional inspector.
Inspector, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any further questions on this proposed budget? Hearing no further questions, is there a motion to modify the mayor's recommendation? You could always give her more money to tear down more of these dilapidated structures.
Absolutely.
Hearing no motion, we'll accept this as presented, and thank you, Ms. Bell. Next up is the Sheriff's Department, Mr. Fitzhugh and Prval. This will be page 23. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for the Sheriff's Department is $28,905,479,000. We increased communicators. We've got 30, I believe, Prval, 30 new rental vehicles were starting since we went on the enterprise fleet, so we're mustering out some of the old ones and replacing with 30 new ones, and that's about what we were doing when we were purchasing, but now we're leasing. We were spending a little over $1 million a year, I believe, when purchasing, so we've got 30 new ones in there. The sheriff and Prval had indicated she wanted to round out her booking department, so I'm recommending 6 to round that out. That way people are not in line, or it's going to help you complete that.
Totally just a data entry level position to relieve our booking officers who are detention officers of doing that. And it's going to be quicker. The process will be quicker for all the officers bringing in arrestees.
Yeah, so when the call went out, I want to give a lot of kudos to the sheriff and Prval. They really stepped up and analyzed the budget. They came back with recommendations and didn't have to twist their arm or anything. They were willing to, Prval maybe have twisted the sheriff's arm. She wanted to round out that one first for the booking, but they gave up several detention officers in their original budget. I told the sheriff there's some grant money coming in, and if if they'll take out the new phone system, which was what, 120,000, if you'll take that out, and I'll put that into the request under the grant, and also $690,000 for the new generator.
That was a little over after speaking to others. That was a high quote.
A high quote, so we'll take that out as well, and we'll pay for that instead of in their budget. We'll put that in our request for the grant that we're getting from the state, so that should cover them. But congratulations to the sheriff and Prval for stepping up and working with what in these hard times. Thank you.
Okay, you've heard the mayor's recommended budget and also the answer from Prval and the sheriff. Are there any specific questions any of you have? Commissioner Piercy.
Just so it doesn't appear I was picking on Mr. Cope, what type of animals are you feeding?
The horses that we have, which are minimum right now, I think we have 4 or 5, and our canine units, which we have 6.
A lot of your horse feed is donated, isn't that right?
It is.
Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members or questions? Or anything else, Mike, you'd like to add, or Prval? Hearing none, is there a motion to modify the sheriff's budget as recommended by the mayor? Hearing none, we're going to accept the mayor's budget for the sheriff's office and move to the next section, which would be special patrols, Mayor, and that's on page 25.
Mr. Chairman, that's $49,000. My recommendation is $49,490. We get in revenue that offsets this figure here. It's all federal money for I believe that's Prval, is that the Lake Patrol?
Corps of Engineers.
The what?
The Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, the Lake Patrol.
We contract, they give us the money and we put it in our budget, so.
So we send out a boat and do Pearcy Priest, I believe?
We do all the court properties.
Okay.
We go, especially on the weekends when it gets active, and we patrol those areas.
Okay, committee, you've heard the mayor's recommendation and also the sheriff's office approval there. Any comments? Hearing and seeing no comments, is there a motion to modify this budget? Hearing none, we'll also accept the special patrols budget as presented by the mayor and move to the administration of sex offender registry found on page 25, Mayor.
My recommendation on the sex offender registry is $86,807.
Prval?
A lot of, 90% of that's going to be salary.
I beg your pardon?
90% of that is over the one person that does that salary. But, we collect fees from TBI, and that goes towards, we have to pay TBI, but that also goes towards our operating. So it's also a revenue generating budget.
Okay. You've heard an explanation from Ms. Prval. Any questions on the sex offender registry budget. Hearing no questions, is there a motion to modify the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we'll also accept that budget and move on to the jail on page 26, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is $20,519,605,000. And talking about that generator we were discussing a minute ago, that's actually in this budget, the jail budget. And it's old, and I'm nervous about it, and I know the sheriff and Prval are nervous about it. We need to get a new one in there. We will, based on the grant that we're going to get from the governor, they'll require that we put this out to bid. So as soon as we get a few weeks down the road, we'll send out bid specifications on that, and should get a pretty good deal.
Any comments from committee members?
And that runs everything, right, Prval? I mean, the whole building.
Oh,
it's a monster of a generator. So
we've got issues down the road, but we'll have to address them sooner than later.
I haven't been on budget for several years. I'm stunned at the small increase here. Thank y'all, Sheriff Prval. This is actually make you want to drop your jaw that we're seeing so small of an increase, and they're working within their budget confines the way they are. I want to heartily say thank you. Having said that, are there any other comments from any other committee members on the jail budget? Hearing none, is there a motion to modify the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we'll also accept the mayor's recommendation and move on to the special purpose DEA fund.
That recommendation is $5,000.
Y'all all familiar, we cannot budget that money. We have to just reappropriate it in late July.
You're saying it's 5,000 is the total there, and I couldn't catch.
There's a total right now, but what we do is bring over our balances, which y'all would have to approve because it's federal money. I cannot budget that money. So we have to just reappropriate that.
Reappropriate every year.
With what our balances are, and we do that in usually August.
Okay. So, any questions on this special purpose DEA fund, which is fluid? Hearing no questions, is there a motion to change this recommendation? Hearing none, we'll also accept the budget for the special purpose DEA fund as presented and move to the drug fund. Also, this one is under tab 8.
Yeah, my recommendation on that's $502,000, and basically a lot of that for our undercover that's overtime.
Prval?
I agree. There's really, I mean, it's a self-funded budget.
There's only 50,000 of it that's overtime that they put in. There's no personnel paid out of this budget. We do budget a $50,000 transfer out of this fund to go into the general fund for
A reimbursement
overtime.
to general fund.
Right.
Okay, committee, you've heard the recommendation on the drug fund. Any questions for the mayor or Ms. Morton? Hearing none, is there a motion to modify this recommended budget? Hearing none, we'll also add the drug fund as presented and move to the ambulance service fund on tab 5 and call for Mr. Hudgens to come up. And let's see, before we do that, you have a budget amendment. I'm a little slow in my old age here.
No, you don't have a budget amendment. No, we'll do yours next month since it's a personnel amendment.
Yeah, I was thinking about the ones we saw in public safety the other night, so we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, we got another one, yeah.
Okay, Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation for the ambulance service fund is $16,491,988. In that, Of course, they're mainly funded from fees and property taxes. We're adding a position to transport, and they've been able to cut as well, but I'm recommending a third ambulance. We were able to, he'd requested 2, and I think we can go ahead, and because of the transport revenue that's been doing very well, there's enough in there to provide him with a new ambulance, and you can take one with high mileage and put it over to the transport rate and use the brand new one out on the road. Okay. Also, in that budget, he is picking up 6 new positions because we're taking sort that was under his budget previously and moving it over, so he will be able to fill those positions. He's picking up 4 in dispatch, 2 EMTs, and 2 paramedics. Am I correct, Melanie?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Karl or Melanie or?
Yes,
Y'all wanna-
we agree with the mayor's recommendation.
One of the few that actually generate revenue for us, and we're always thankful for that. Any questions from the committee members to Karl?
Chairman, the overtime budget is quite a bit less than the amended 2020, and I know you've hired people. Do you think you have enough overtime, or do you think you'll be dealing with it in fund balance?
When we went on the timekeeping system, we had to transfer, and Lisa can probably explain it better than I can. The scheduled overtime that the paramedics and EMTs earn did come out of line item 133. When they went to the timekeeping system, all of the overtime, scheduled and unscheduled, is now coming out of 187. And she will make that amendment later in the budget year, from what I understand.
I just want to make sure y'all are comfortable with it. I don't question it as long as y'all are comfortable that you have enough or you have a way to transfer it.
And that's what we'll do. We're trying to let y'all see how much overtime that we really need in above scheduled overtime. So we'll be amending out of the regular paraprofessionals and moving that into overtime.
Line 133 shows the actual salaries of all the full-time EMTs and paramedics. But later, she will do a transfer, so the actual scheduled overtime will come out of the 187 also.
Mr. Dodd, thank you. Did that answer your questions? All right. Any other questions for Karl or Melanie? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to modify the mayor's recommended budget for the ambulance service? Hearing none, we'll also accept that as presented. Thank you all very much. Wait, let's see, make sure. Yeah, we've got a budget amendment on this one, so.
We are requesting to transfer $25,000 from our communications equipment line item 708 into our other contracted services 399. We pay our billing company out of the 399 account. The more we collect, the more we have to pay. And it is within our own budget.
That's actually good news to see that
It is good
increase.
news.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Dodd makes a motion, second by Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, next is the traffic control. And That's on page 25, Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is $20,000 for our traffic control. We in Rutherford County basically have, I think, maybe 4 traffic lights.
4 traffic lights.
And this pays for the electricity going to those lights. If you recall, down at the Speedway on 840, we have a traffic light down there that's out of the city. We have a few more traffic lights around the county, and we pay for the electricity and pay the city. I guess they do the timing and maintenance on them, I would assume, because we don't have
a contract out with SOW.
We're contracted to someone to do that because we don't have a street department.
Okay, committee, you've seen the request for the traffic control, basically the same as it was last year. Do I hear any questions? Do I hear a recommendation to change the proposed budget? Hearing none, it stands as presented. And we're going to go to other business, and I think we want to talk to risk management.
As one budget amendment.
Yeah, we do have an amendment from Mr. Elam. He's making his way up here. Welcome, Ed.
Good evening, Chairman P. and Commissioners, Mayor Ketron. What I am requesting is that we put $9,163 in line item 317, data processing services, and also put $127 into building and contents insurance, and then $1,270 of that to come out of travel, and then $8,020 to come out of liability insurance. This is, if you remember when I presented my budget, this is the ticketing process. This is licenses for DocuPhase. We're adding additional license. The DocuPhase part is kind of a patch between the Board of Education because they use a little different system than what we use. So it allows us to see terminations, new hires, and things like that in real time. Instead of waiting for them, they allow us to go into their server and see those items, but we have to have that license. But it allows us to get things in more real time instead of us waiting for somebody to send us a report and then telling us to take them off. One thing I will say that the importance of that is if you have someone that we're not notified they've been terminated and yet their benefits continue until we're notified, then it's a little difficult to get that back. So that's the purpose of the licenses. And then the ticketing system is also in there that we discussed in the last budget. That's all of that together. That would give me where I can start it now instead of waiting until after like August to start it.
Committee, you've heard the request, Mayor.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I totally support this request from Mr. Elam. When he first described it to me, it kind of shocked me, but it made sense. But it was just 2 different bodies, school board, principals in each one of our schools, and talking to their assistants to send in information that this person was no longer on the plan. And let's say they left and or were terminated, and then they've still got their little card and they go in and have some type of minor surgery or any kind of surgery from the time that we catch up with it. Sometimes they were discharged, but then we still are stuck with it because they went to the doctor or the hospital and we had to pay for it. So then his department was spending a lot of time trying to track them down to get them to pay the money back that they spent that really wasn't theirs to spend. So this software is going to make a world of difference in cutting out that loss for us and keeping our expenditures down and make things a whole lot smoother in that transition. So I totally support his recommendation for budget amendment.
Okay, any discussion or a motion from the committee?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Second, and I didn't catch who that was. Commissioner Dodd. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
Mayor Ketron, Commissioners, thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Okay, our next scheduled meeting is tomorrow night, 21st, 5:30. After that, as Chairman Allen has told us at our last commission meeting on Tuesday, May the 26th, we'll have a joint meeting with Health, Education, Budget, and our school board members. And that'll be at 5:30 here. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just want to make sure everybody is aware of the location change. We typically conduct this meeting at the central office, but because they're not set up for the electronic meetings and we are, and we've got more space, we're going to conduct it at the courthouse.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Allen. The next meeting after that is Wednesday, May 27th, then Wednesday, June 3rd, then Thursday, June 4th, and I think that's our standard meeting. And something I want to mention, since Sonia's here too, we've actually already done online surveys for Ms. Nolan's evaluation for the year, but we haven't covered that. I'd like to add that to our June 4th agenda, unless we're just covered up. And the way we've been moving along, I don't think we will be, but I'd like for those results to be presented to the committee at that time. And Mayor, anything else?
No, sir. See you tomorrow night.
Guys, hour and a half. I'm proud of you. Thank you. We're adjourned.